Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today. My name is Lynn Javor. I'm an Associate Director of Admission here at Carnegie Mellon University. This is part of our Admission Insights series. So this one will focus on Financial Aid 101. So we'll talk a little bit about some basic terms and some things that you should know that will hopefully help you through the financial aid application process. At the end of the program, we will have a slide that will have our contact information. So feel free to reach out to us in the coming weeks or months with any questions you have about financial aid, and we're happy to help as best we can. So like I mentioned, today's program will be a slideshow. I'll walk you through everything and kind of give you some basic information that we hope helps. So we'll get started. So today's agenda, some of the things that we'll cover are some terms to know, financial aid basics, types of aid, and then we'll end with some of the things that we think might be helpful for you to know. So things that maybe you should be asking of financial aid offices or financial aid officers, admission staff that you may be working with, just some general questions that might be helpful for you to ask. So we'll start with terms to know. So financial aid terms to know. The first one and the big one that you'll probably hear a lot about in your financial aid application process is the FAFSA, which is the free application for student aid, for federal student aid, offered through the U.S. or the Department of Education. This is a free form, so please make sure you are aware of that. Do not pay to complete this form. It's a free form on the Department of Ed's website. You will need to electronically sign this form. You'll file this form every year. So you will be given what's called an FSA ID to sign the form. So you'll want to hang on to that for 4 years or, as many years as you'll need to file the FAFSA. You'll be able to use that FSA ID over and over to complete the FAFSA. Same with any parent or guardian that is also filing the FAFSA. They will also need to sign it. So it will be helpful for them to have an FSA ID and to remember that for future years. The nice thing about the FAFSA is that they use the IRS data retrieval tool. So that means instead of data entering your tax information and your family's tax information, you can have that pulled in through the IRS site. So that's definitely a time saver. So if you're able to do that, I would suggest doing that. The next term you'll see on our slideshow here is the CSS profile. This is an additional financial aid application, one that Carnegie Mellon uses, and it's offered through College Board. So you may find other institutions that are also using the CSS profile, or they may have their own additional financial aid application. So keep that in mind when you're filing your financial aid application to check all the sites and make sure, all the university sites, to make sure you're doing all the applications that they are asking for. Next is the cost of attendance. This is sort of like a kind of like a budget, right? A total cost of attending the university. So it will include things such as tuition, fees, living expenses. It can vary by institution. So for example, Carnegie Mellon's cost of attendance will include a transportation cost. That is when you come to Carnegie Mellon and use your student ID, you can use it as sort of like a bus pass or for our local transportation. So that cost is built into your cost of attendance. So when you are looking at different universities, keep in mind that the cost of attendance will vary between those universities. The EFC, you'll hear that a lot in financial aid conversations. That stands for the expected family contribution. That is what is determined by the financial aid application. So the FAFSA, the CSS profile, any financial aid application that the institution is using, they will determine your expected family contribution. That is your ability, the family's ability to pay for the university, for college, not so much your willingness, but your ability. That is where that contribution, that's how that contribution is determined. There are two types of methodology. This is the first one, federal methodology, known as FM in financial aid language. It's the formula that's used to determine your eligibility for federal aid. It is determined by Congress, and it will be, that's what the FAFSA determines. So the FAFSA uses federal methodology to determine your aid eligibility. So the need, that's another term you will hear a lot. That is the difference between the cost of attendance and the expected family contribution, or the EFC. So what will happen is you'll have a cost of attendance, which is your total cost to attend a university. We will subtract your expected family contribution, and then that remaining cost is the need. That is what is, for Carnegie Mellon, that is something that we look to meet students' needs with a mix of federal funding, loans, work study, as well as our institutional funding, which may be grants. So the need is what most universities are looking to meet. So you may hear if a university says they meet full need, this would be the number that they're meeting. They are meeting the difference of the cost of attendance minus the expected family contribution. So I mentioned there were two methodologies. The first one was FM, which was the federal. This is the second, institutional methodology, also known as IM. This is the formula that a college or a university may use to determine their institutional eligibility. So for Carnegie Mellon, that the IM or the methodology is, the IM methodology is used with the CSS profile application. So another thing to keep in mind is need blind or need aware. You may hear these terms. These terms refer to an institution's admission policy in relationship to financial aid. So need blind would mean that a university is not looking at your financial aid when they are making your admission decision. Need aware would be the opposite. So they are looking at your financial aid information, your application, when they are making your decision, your admission decision. Carnegie Mellon, just for your reference, is need blind, not looking at your financial aid application when we are making your admission decision. Net price calculator. This is a tool, an estimator tool that families can use to kind of determine the affordability of an institution prior to actually applying for admission or for aid. Any school that offers federal funding is required to have a net price calculator on their website, or an estimator calculator of some sort. We use the net price calculator through College Board. So for our net price calculator, it takes maybe 10 to 15 minutes to complete. You will use your tax information, your income, asset, family income, family asset information. And once it's completed, you will receive back your estimate. And then you can use that estimate to review and kind of determine if the institution that you're interested in is actually affordable for you and for your family. Here at Carnegie Mellon, we also would welcome you sending your results to us if you want to talk about those results from the net price calculator. We have a form called Continue the Conversation, where you can send us your results so that we'll have them as well, and we can kind of review them with you and kind of answer any questions you may have from that estimate. Merit is known kind of as grants and scholarships that are awarded based on students' academic or artistic merit, not necessarily tied to financial need. We at Carnegie Mellon do not offer merit scholarships, but many institutions do. So you'll want to make note of that if there are those opportunities with other institutions. Outside scholarships, that's any scholarship offered by a source other than the college or through the federal government. So things like, there may be local community scholarships you may be applying for and earning and winning. National scholarships, there's a Gates scholarship, there's a Coca-Cola scholarship, really big scholarships there. So that's what's defined as an outside scholarship, anything that's coming outside of the college or of the government's aid. Okay, just some financial aid basics for you. So what is financial aid? So it's assistance that's given to help families cover the cost of attending college. So we talked a little bit about need-based there versus merit-based. Need-based is anything that will be given to you to help meet that need, right? And those can include things like institutional funding. It can be any types of grants, scholarships, whatever the university is meeting your need with. The merit will be more likely scholarships from a university. That's really the main difference between the naming of the need-based and the merit-based. Gift aid, you'll hear, is any kind of grants or scholarships, basically things that you're not paying back, right? So if you receive the federal Pell Grant, or if you receive a grant through a university, those are things that you will not pay back. So they are considered gift aid. Self-help is anything like federal loans or federal work study. So those will be awarded to you through the completion of your FAFSA. And like I mentioned, they can come from state or federal governments, so keep that in mind as well. If you, whatever state you live in, they may offer some sort of state grant, so you'll want to make sure you're paying attention to any applications or deadlines they may have for their funding. It can come from institutions. You know, Carnegie Mellon has an institutional grant that we offer students, and then outside or private sources other than the family. Again, those can be outside scholarships and things like that. College costs. Let's break this down a little bit. So this is just to remind you that both institutions and families are working within budgets, and different institutions have different costs and policies. So this graph, it can look a little confusing to look at it just straight off. So let me kind of break it down for you. The whole bar, the gray, the blue, and the red is what's known, kind of, you'll hear it as a sticker price, what the cost is for you to attend the school, right? The net price, which is just the blue and the red, is actually what you're responsible for. So if you look at it at the bottom, you'll see the gray is anything that's grants or scholarships. So those can be merit scholarships. Those can be any need-based aid. They can be Pell Grants, basically gift aid or scholarships, things that you're not paying back, the aid that you're receiving, but you are not responsible to pay back after graduation. The blue and the red, the blue are federal loans. So those can be the subsidized or the unsubsidized, which is the loan program through the Department of Ed. And there's also a Parent Plus loan through the Department of Ed. So those are loans. So you'll borrow those and you'll be responsible for paying those back after graduation. And then your out-of-pocket costs, which are the reds, those are any outside scholarships, cash payments, private loans. So anything that you would need to look for to kind of meet the difference, right? So if you're getting all your grants, your scholarships, your federal loans, but there is still a difference in what is owed to the university, that's where it would be your out-of-pocket cash, or out-of-pocket costs, excuse me. So that could be cash payments, it could be private loans, or that's where you will look for outside scholarships to kind of bridge that gap between the actual cost and what's coming out of your pocket. So that's just a little bit about this bar and the difference between the net price and the sticker price. So some things you should know before you go. So we talked a little bit, or I talked a little bit about the net price calculators a few moments ago. So every institution that accepts federal funds must have a version on their website. They may vary in ease of completion and accuracy, and they are usually anonymous. Like I said, we have a form that you can send us your results. So we're happy to look at those with you and talk about those with you. If you have any unique or special circumstances, it's always recommended to have a conversation with a financial aid counselor. So obviously with things that are happening in this day with COVID and concerns with income and possible unemployment, those are definitely unique circumstances. And we as financial aid advisors understand, and financial aid counselors understand, that those are happening. So we would definitely say, if you're in one of those circumstances or situations, just reach out to the university that you're applying to have a conversation to see what their policies may be on special circumstances, what the process may be to file a special circumstances request, or to at least just generally understand what they consider to be a special circumstance. So need-based financial aid, I mentioned it a little bit earlier. So a need-based aid offer will usually be a combination of grants and scholarship. It can also include work study and loan programs that attempt to meet the need of the family. So again, in the definition or the terms that we talked about earlier, you'll have your cost of attendance minus your expected family contribution, and that will give you your financial needs. So for example, at Carnegie Mellon, if your cost of attendance was, I will just give a general easy to do math problem here. If your cost of attendance is $75,000 for the year and your expected family contribution is $25,000 for the year, that will leave you a financial need of $50,000. At Carnegie Mellon, we are very close to meeting 100% of financial need with a mix or a combination of our university grants, work study, and federal loan programs. So that would mean we would look to meet that $50,000 need with those types of aid. Again, the expected family contribution, or EFC, is an amount used by colleges to evaluate a family's ability to pay for college. And when you're filling out the FAFSA or any other financial aid, institutions' financial aid applications, that they will use things like the direct contribution from income, drawing down on assets, and borrowing to determine that ability. And the amount can be calculated using the FM and the IM, a combination, one or the other. Some schools only require the federal methodology or the FAFSA. So just make sure, again, as I mentioned, you'll want to make sure you're following the university's application process to make sure you're meeting all of their, you're completing all of their applications. And also keep in mind, a calculated EFC doesn't mean that your bill will match exactly. That is an expected family contribution. So that does not mean that's exactly what you will be responsible for paying when you receive your invoice. How's the EFC determined? The EFC is based on an annual review. Like I mentioned when we started, you'll file the financial aid application every year, all 4 years. So it's based on an annual review of your income, family income, and non-retirement assets. So it's looking at both taxable and untaxable income. It also looks at savings, investments, properties, and businesses. There are allowances built into the application and into the methodology that protect your income and assets to make it equitable. So not all income and assets are included. Certain things are adjusted so the cost of living is a prime example. Cost of living in California is definitely different than the cost of living here in Western Pennsylvania. So those types of things are factored into the methodology. Some other things that may be factored in are educational savings for younger children, a number in the household in college. So if there are 2 of you in college at the same time, that's obviously different than just one being in college at a time. There are dozens more. So, each college and university may use different allowances. There are things for older parents as far as savings. So like an income allowance for older parents, we understand that you have less time to save for your retirement. So that is an allowance that can be factored into the methodology. So some things to remember when you're applying for financial aid. So for those of you that are seniors this year, or rising seniors, you will use your 2019 tax income. Juniors will use 2020 tax income. Sophomores will use 2021 tax income. Remember, you'll do the one application that all schools are using is the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA. Free, I cannot state that enough. It is a free application. The CSS profile, we charge $25 for the first submission, and then if you file at other universities, it would be $16 for each additional university that you're filing. There are waivers available, so make sure if the cost is kind of a concern for you, please reach out to the financial aid office of the university you're applying to and ask about a waiver. And the primary documentation that you'll need will be your tax returns and W-2s, and some institutions may require the IRS transcript. Keep in mind that FAFSA, you will be offered you'll be able to pull in your tax information using the IRS data retrieval tool. Always a great thing to use. Cuts back on the time to complete the application and any possible data entry errors that may occur. Deadline's a big thing to keep in mind. Remember, for all state grants, it's a May 1st deadline. So if your state offers grants, make sure you're adhering to that deadline. Institutions may have different deadlines. Some may have different deadlines for their internal scholarships. And it could depend on if you're applying to a regular decision, an early decision, an early action plan. So just make sure you're checking the deadlines. For financial aid for Carnegie Mellon, if you are applying early decision, you'll want to file your FAFSA and your CSS profile by November 15th. And for regular decision, that deadline is February 15th. Again, Pennsylvania's state grant deadline is May 1st. So keep in mind, that's an additional deadline you'll want to make sure you're meeting. So let's talk about types of financial aid. So there are federal and state grants, which will be determined through the filing of the FAFSA. So you may hear about the federal Pell Grant. There is something called a federal SEOG grant, which is a supplemental educational opportunity grant. There are institutional grants and scholarships offered by each individual institution. There are federal direct loans. So for students, you can borrow a subsidized loan, which is a need-based loan, and an unsubsidized loan, which is a non-need-based loan. So make sure you're checking into those. There are loan limits that students are able to borrow on those. So for example, as a first year, you can borrow $3,500 in the subsidized and up to $2,000 in the unsubsidized. As a sophomore, the subsidized increases to $4,500 per year. The unsub still remains at $2,000. And then as a junior and senior, your loan limits will increase to $5,500 per year in the subsidized, and it will still remain at $2,000 in the unsubsidized loan for both your junior and your senior year. There's also a federal direct plus loan parent program. So if your parent is looking to borrow a loan and wants to borrow through the Department of Education, they can also do that. And then keep in mind, there are also alternative loans from private lenders. So things like banks. So maybe if you have a relationship with a bank, most banks will offer some sort of education loan. There are loans through local. I don't want to say local, local lending places. So if you belong to one of those, you can definitely look to borrow through them if they have educational loans. There are also larger private lenders that you can also look to borrow through as well. So we'll wrap up here with what questions you should be asking, what may be helpful for you to ask. So one would be to ask if they practice a need blind admission. So making sure if they're need blind or need aware, if they're taking into account your financial aid application when making the admission decision. Does the school offer merit-based scholarships, so based on academics or artistic performance? And if so, what are those requirements to qualify, and what are those deadlines to qualify for those scholarships? Does the school guarantee to meet full need? And like I mentioned earlier, Carnegie Mellon is about 99% there. We meet about 99% of full need, and that is with a mix of grants and federal loans and federal work study. So definitely ask the universities what they're doing to meet need. Can you expect to receive a similar financial aid offer all 4 years, assuming things in the family, things in the household don't change? That's a great question. Since you will file your FAFSA each year, things could change, right? You could have another student in college, maybe another student not in college. There could be changes to your income, your parents' income or assets. So you're gonna wanna make sure you ask the question, what could possibly change in the next 4 years? And that's where the net price calculator or the estimator can really help too, because you can kind of use the tool to figure out what may happen, in 2 years if you have a younger sibling that's going to be going into college as well. You can change some of the data on the net price calculator to get an estimate as to what your financial aid offer or your need or your expected family contribution may look like in future years. What's the policy on outside scholarships? So some will use the outside scholarships to meet your need, to meet your cost of attendance. You want to make sure that they're not replacing any of their funding with your outside scholarships. So that's a great question to ask if you're looking to apply to outside scholarships. How will those outside scholarships be applied to your financial aid offer? What's the financial aid deadline and what forms do you require? So again, remember there could be different deadlines for different application plans and what forms are needed. We use the College Board, the CSS profile, as well as iDocs, which is their document requesting service. So we will ask that you upload your taxes, tax returns, W-2s, any schedules that are used for your taxes. We ask that those are uploaded to iDocs so that we can review the information that was provided on the CSS profile. So make sure you're checking with each institution to find out what forms they require. When will you get your financial aid offer? So for Carnegie Mellon, if you are an early decision student, you will file the financial aid deadline of November 15th. We will release admission decisions in the middle of December, and then financial aid offers will be shortly after that. For our regular decision process, we will release admission decisions at the end of March, and your financial aid offer letter is available the very next day. So make sure you're asking that question. How does the financial aid application or policy differ for early decision and early action students? So make sure you're asking the difference between the application plans and how that may affect financial aid applications. If the financial aid offer is insufficient, how do I appeal for more aid? So just remember, contact the financial aid office of the university or the admission office of the university that you're applying to, and just ask what their special circumstances or their appeal process may be, and just make sure you're following through those processes and deadlines. They will most likely ask for some sort of documentation, so you'll want to start thinking about what that may include. If a parent has lost a job or a family has lost income or assets, what's the documentation to kind of support that change to the family's circumstances. And then again, any special circumstances that you may have with everything that's happening with COVID and things. Most schools have been pretty forthright with what they're doing, forthcoming with what they're doing with their special circumstances. And you should be able to find out that information by doing just a little research on their website. So as I mentioned, we are here to help with anything that we can in the financial aid space. Does not have to be related to Carnegie Mellon. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have throughout the financial aid process. Our Office of Admission processes financial aid for all incoming first-year students, transfer students, so please feel free to reach out to us. Our email is listed here on the slide. It's admission@andrew.cmu.edu. There's our phone number. We are available Monday through Fridays, 8:30 to 5 Eastern Standard Time. We live chat, so if you're on our website and you have a quick question and you see that we're taking chats, please feel free to chat us. Another thing I would say is we offer virtual counseling sessions, so you can sign up for a virtual counseling session through our site, and that will give you the chance to have a one-on-one conversation with a counselor like myself, and maybe ask some more detailed questions that you may have regarding our application process, financial aid process, or anything just about Carnegie Mellon that you have questions about. So we're happy to do that. So with that, that ends our presentation today. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this, and I hope it was helpful to you, and I hope useful in the next few weeks and months of your college search. And please, again, let us know if there are any questions that we can help you with. Thanks so much and take care.